Before he ever became the executive producer of a Michael Jackson record, Mark had spent years producing and directing gay porn.
So this leaked video of Beyonce from the beginning of her career has been going viral, y'all. And for everyone who has seen the video already, you know how weird it is, okay? Having this girl sit on this weird executive's lap, falling back into his shoulders, all types of uncomfortable stuff. But apparently it gets a lot darker, bro. I don't know how it can get much worse than it already is, but we already know that what we see on social media is usually just the tip of the iceberg. Now, I'm not going to say too much because a bunch of you guys have been sending me this video to react to. This Beyonce video is really weird. We're about to hop into it. Make sure you guys do leave a like down below and subscribe. But let's get into this video because I'm really curious to know everything that's associated with this weird clip that just resurfaced out of nowhere, bro.
All right, here we go. Come on over here. Here, you can do. You want to sit up? You want to make this easier? You can sit on my lap, Michael.
Now, some of you guys might have seen this clip that recently started circulating.
Weird.
Of a 20-year-old Beyonce sitting on the lap of a producer named Mark Schaffel. And the whole reason Beyonce was even around this man in the first place had to do with Michael Jackson. So this was back in 2001, right after 9/11, and Beyonce had just turned 20 at the time. In the footage, Beyonce is talking to Michael Jackson over the phone about potentially working together. Around the same time, Michael was putting together his charity record, What More Can I Give? But when you actually look into who Mark Schaffel is and what eventually happened between him and Michael Jackson, this clip gets a whole lot stranger. So basically, this was recorded all the way back in 2001, and while portions of this footage have existed for years, it really started making the rounds on a much larger scale recently. At the time, Beyonce was, of course, like I said, only 20 years old, still a member of Destiny's Child, and she was in the studio recording vocals for Michael Jackson's charity single, What More Can I Give? And that's where the man sitting right there comes into the story. His name is Mark Schaffel, and at this point, Mark was actually working pretty closely with Michael Jackson. He was the executive producer behind the charity project and essentially one of the people helping Michael organize everything behind the scenes, coordinating sessions and bringing together this massive list of artists that Michael wanted on a record. And Beyonce was one of those artists. So in this footage, Beyonce is sitting there with Mark and Michael's team when Michael ends up calling during the session. And Beyonce is clearly starstruck. I mean, who would not be? She's being told Michael is a huge fan of hers. She can barely believe she's about to speak to him. And then at one point, Mark looks at Beyonce and says, "You want to make this easier? You can sit on my lap."
You want to make this easier? You can sit on my lap, Michael.
Now, the backstory to all this is actually quite interesting because the man Beyonce is sitting on wasn't just some random producer who happened to be in the room. Mark Schaffel had become somebody who was working pretty closely with Michael around this time. The two had reportedly become friends a few years earlier. And despite Mark having basically no background in the music business, Michael eventually brought him in as the executive producer for this What More Can I Give record. Now, mind you, this was a huge project. Michael was basically trying to put together another massive charity record in the spirit of We Are the World following 9/11, bringing in artists like Mariah Carey, Celine Dion, Usher, and Destiny's Child. So Mark suddenly found himself helping oversee a Michael Jackson record filled with some of the biggest artists in the world. And Michael clearly trusted this guy. So when you see Beyonce sitting there talking to Michael on the phone,
weird,
that's the position Mark had managed to put himself in. And that's
Weird.
when you hear him tell her, "You want to make this easier? You can sit on my lap." Now, what makes this story considerably stranger is when Michael Jackson and the people around him would apparently learn about Mark not long after this footage was recorded. Because Mark Schaffel's background wasn't in the music industry, right? Before he ever became the executive producer of a Michael Jackson record, Mark had spent years producing and directing gay. He and a business partner had owned an adult film company, and Mark himself later openly acknowledged that this had been his business for years. And according to Michael Jackson, he had absolutely no idea about this. Years later, during a videotaped deposition, Michael said one of his lawyers actually had to show him footage proving what Mark had previously been doing. And then Michael said, "I was shocked." According to testimony from one of Michael's former attorneys, Michael appeared angry and upset when he was shown the material. And that same night, he called Mark and told him that he was off the charity project. So I guess he told him to go and beat it, right? And this is where the story starts getting even messier. Because despite Michael trying to cut ties with Mark in 2001, Mark would somehow end up in...
This is what I mean, bro. There's always more to the story than what people actually see. Shout out to whoever sent me this video, because it really exposes the nature of the industry. How is it that The person that Michael Jackson put in place to help executive produce this whole charity tape had a past of being in the pornography industry, bro. Had little old Beyonce. I thought she was 19 years old in that clip, but allegedly she's 20. Little old Beyonce, neck back in this man's lap, bro. Don't find it coincidental at all.
Michael's orbit afterward. He later helped Michael produce television specials, handled various business matters for him, and eventually the relationship between these two completely fell apart, to the point where Mark sued Michael Jackson for millions of dollars, and Michael countersued him. And by 2006, they were fighting over money in a Santa Monica courtroom. But honestly, the lawsuit itself isn't even the most important part of this story. What's more interesting is what the whole situation says about how close Mark had managed to get to Michael Jackson in the first place.
Now, this month is the last opportunity to get access to the exact business system that has helped students like Elijah make over $10,000 in a single week, or even students like Ariel and Jeremiah, who were able to make $6,000 in a single day. And the beauty about it is they made all of their money from their phone. Now, we all already know that starting an online business is the one opportunity that you have to create location freedom, time freedom, and the peace of mind that will allow you to do what you want with your time. So if you're serious about establishing an online income, click the link in the description, watch the short video to learn exactly what my students and I are doing, and even take a look at some of the testimonials from students that I am currently working with. And if you decide to take the next step, then you can book your one-on-one call where you and I will speak directly about how to get you started with this business. But with that being said, let's hop back into this video.
And that's what makes this Beyonce footage a lot more interesting to me. Because when you first watch it, you're basically just seeing this awkward moment where a young Beyonce is told to sit on a producer's lap while she's trying to talk to Michael Jackson. But once you know the backstory, you realize that the man sitting there had somehow worked his way into a position where he was now in the room working around Beyonce and had direct access to Michael. Now, obviously, I can't look at this clip and automatically turn.
And it's like, in my eyes, for someone like him to have that type of past, it just goes to show that he has experience in grooming people, right? He has experience in working the room to get people to do what he likes. Oh yeah, just come sit on my lap, make it easy. That was his first response. My first response would be like, yo, babe, Beyonce, come over here, sit down, hop on the phone real quick. You know what I'm saying? My first reaction isn't, oh yeah, just come over here, sit on daddy's lap. The fuck? Weird, bro.
Into something that Beyonce herself has never said happened. There isn't evidence that Beyonce had accused Mark Schaffel of grooming her or doing anything sexual to her. But what is interesting is that this wasn't the only time a young Beyonce found herself navigating an industry where older people around her could have a lot more control over the situation than she did. So Beyonce has actually been pretty outspoken about this aspect of the music industry, talking about having to slowly take control of her own career as she got older. She once explained that when she turned 18 and started becoming more involved in the business side of her career, she began clashing with her own father, who was also her manager.
I had to just tell myself at some point you have to be the adult that your father has raised.
According to Beyonce, there were times she would tell him no to an opportunity and he would book it anyway. And then she felt like she had to go through with it because backing out would make her look bad. And even back when Destiny's Child was a thing, Beyonce talked about people trying to push the group into presenting themselves in ways they weren't comfortable with. Basically, people around them were trying to push them toward a more revealing, sexualized image. The kind of thing people still criticize today when they talk about how young female artists get marketed. And keep in mind, the members of Destiny's Child were basically around 20 years old at the time, still extremely young and already having to set boundaries around how much of themselves they're willing to show. She said people had tried to get them into bathing suits, but the members of Destiny's Child had already set limits on how revealing they were willing to be. And I think that's important context, because when people talk about control in the music industry, it doesn't always have to mean somebody being physically forced into a room or some huge criminal conspiracy. Sometimes it's much more ordinary and subtle than that.
Way more subtle,
young,
bro.
Everybody around you is older. Someone controls the opportunity you want. Somebody else controls the schedule. They're telling you how to dress, how to present yourself, the kind of image that's going to make you more marketable. And the idea is that if you do this, this might open more doors for you. And another person can influence whether you even get access to the superstar you're trying to work with. And technically, you can still say, no, I'm not doing it. But the question becomes how comfortable a 20-year-old artist actually feels saying no when she's standing in somebody else's room. surrounded by people who hold the key.
Surrounded by someone else who has the key to her success, on the phone with Michael Jackson, and in the phone with in the room with these executives, bro. Little old her gonna say no.
To the opportunities she spent her entire childhood working toward. And that's part of why this Beyonce clip has generated such a reaction. I can't tell you if Beyonce felt humiliated. I can't tell you if she felt pressured. But we can look at the environment she was coming up in and the amount of control she would later fight to have over her own career, and understand why people watching this footage today see the interaction differently. Now, when it comes to this particular clip, the reactions have been pretty mixed. Some people look at this and generally don't think there's anything wrong with it. There are multiple people in the room. Beyonce appears comfortable. She's excited about talking to Michael Jackson, and to them, it's basically just an awkward little moment from 2001 that people are trying to turn into something much bigger than it actually was. And then you have the other side who watch it and immediately think, why is this grown producer telling a 20-year-old Beyonce to come sit on his lap in the first place? And I definitely lean more toward that second reaction. Not because I watched the clip and immediately thought something crazy had happened to Beyonce behind the scenes. I mean, we don't really have evidence of that.
I think something did happen. I think something did happen to Beyonce behind the scenes.
Kind of off. And I think the reason why this is actually worth looking at a little closer is because of what we already know about the entertainment industry in general. There's always been this strange gap between what the public gets to see and what actually happens behind closed doors. The public sees the interviews, the red carpets, the studio footage, but obviously those are usually the moments somebody was comfortable enough to record and eventually comfortable enough to release. And I've always looked at situations like this a certain way. If something slightly strange actually makes it all the way to the surface and we, the public, we see it, meaning somebody filmed it, kept it, and years later decided to release it to the public, you naturally start wondering what the moments that don't make it to the surface actually look like.
Bro.
And I'm not saying that automatically means something sinister happened here. I'm saying that the entertainment industry is an industry built almost entirely around controlling what people see. It's almost like a game of illusions. And interestingly
100%.
enough, that's literally part of how this Beyonce footage became public in the first place, because the producer Mark Schaffel apparently recorded a huge amount of Michael Jackson's private life during the years that he was around him. He told TMZ that between 2000 and 2003, he filmed tons of footage showing Michael's day-to-day life, Michael traveling, hanging out with friends, interacting with other celebrities. And this footage, I'm assuming, was a part of all that, right? And now more than 20 years later, Mark is apparently trying to package that archive into a documentary series about Michael. And that's kind of the point here. When you're dealing with an industry built around image, access, and perception, and illusions, you always have to remember that the version we eventually see is still only the version somebody else chose to show us. So when people watch this clip and ask, if this is one of the moments they were comfortable showing us, what did the moments we never saw look like? So of course it doesn't automatically prove anything happened behind closed doors, but considering everything we know about how much access Mark had to Michael, and then how complicated that relationship eventually became, and just how much unreleased footage he apparently still possesses, I think it's a fair reason to look at this moment a little differently.
Bro, my question is this. Why did that particular clip of Beyonce come out? Even if he's trying to package the stuff about Michael Jackson, why did that particular clip of Beyonce come out? It could have been any other clip of Beyonce, but it was a clip of Beyonce sitting on this guy's lap. Once again, I don't find it coincidental, but I don't think any of these things are actually coincidences at all.
So the footage overall is just kind of weird. I mean, really, he could have just been like, hey, take the phone and you can sit here, but then he's telling her to sit on his lap. So the fact that he was comfortable enough in this environment to ask her that, and that didn't even register to him as something that might look weird, I think that in itself stands out. So it does really expose how certain behaviors can start to feel normal inside these industries when everybody in the room is used to operating a certain way. So I guess the question is, was this even necessary? I don't think so. But what do you guys think? Especially knowing the backstory behind the producer and Michael, and how when Michael found out that he was basically directing and producing gay in his past, he basically...
All right, we gotta chill. You gotta chill. YouTube has strict guidelines. Trust me when I tell you. But look, once again, I'm not really surprised. Obviously, hearing the details about the situation, it obviously raises an eyebrow, but I'm not surprised, bro. Time and time again, this is exactly what we expose. Someone who's comfortable to groom people is obviously gonna fit right in this weird Hollywood industry. But I'm gonna end this video here. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe. And I'm gonna catch you on the next one, man. Peace.